Hola mi gente, ¿cómo están? Aquí Alba con ustedes en el canal que se llama Seriela. Estamos aquí para hablar de libros y algunos en español desde Puerto Rico. Hello people, how are you doing? The channel is Seriela. My name is Alba Mar. You may call me Alba. We're here to talk about books, and specifically today, I'm feeling very happy and grateful to BookTube for motivating me to finish the trilogy, Taylor Branch's Trilogy of America during the King years. Specifically, I finished part 3 at Canaan's Edge. But why do I thank BookTube? Because if it hadn't been for the ladies at Tome Topple, I wouldn't have even started on it. I've had these books forever, especially the first 2 that I bought. I brought them from New York to Puerto Rico, so I've had them for 12 years on my shelves. I had at Canaan's Edge, and I had number 2, Pillar of Fire. The only one that I didn't have was the first one, which had sold out already, Parting the Waters, which I found in a used bookstore in Housing Works in New York last summer. So yeah, I listened to this one during the first Tome Topple that I participated in. I listened to it on audiobook, and it was a great experience. There were 2 African American actors, 1 man, 1 woman, did a fantastic job. But then I realized when I did the audiobook plus the physical copy for Pillar of Fire, I realized that the audiobook had been abridged. So I left the audiobook and I read the physical copy, and it was an engrossing read, captivating. And you know that I've had this one since the beginning of the year, and I finally finished it a couple of days ago, and I have been putting it off. This is going to be a very personal, a very personal, emotional, individual reaction to the whole series. You know that I had gotten emotional during the reading of this specific 3rd part of the trilogy, because I was emotionally invested in it. I remember the assassination vividly. You know that Dr. King started focusing on the northern cities and racism and discrimination, especially in housing, the poverty issues in the northern cities during these years, during 1965 and 1968. So I was emotionally invested, and I took my sweet time finishing it. Luckily, fortunately, I didn't cry too many more times during the reading of the book. I really admire the work that went through that Taylor Branch and his whole team, because this was a team effort, especially when he acknowledges it in the back of the book. His acknowledgments take quite a few pages, and you could see that it took a group effort, not only to write this 3rd volume of the trilogy at Canaan's Edge, but all 3 of the books. Taylor Branch was a journalist. Let me put this down because it weighs a ton. Taylor Branch was at first a journalist in that tri-state area, originally in Washington, D.C. And then he started writing books. One of them specifically with Bill Russell. Apparently he likes basketball. He's also written another book about basketball. And then he started writing the books on America in the King years. And that subtitle for the whole series, America in the King years, is significant because it is America during those years. The first part, Parting the Waters, for which he won a Pulitzer Prize, is from 1954 to 1963. And that was written in 1988, and he won the Pulitzer Prize in 1989 for Parting the Waters. And then he wrote Pillar of Fire, which also won a prize. And those are the years 1963 to 1965. And then the final years are from 1965 to 1968. And what I really marvel at in this book is the fact that you feel like a fly on the wall. If you ever wanted to read a history book in which you feel as if you were actually there, like a fly on the wall during very important deliberations, you get that sensation reading these books. Apparently, he went through a vast amount of transcripts and recordings and FBI documents, declassified FBI documents. He makes a lot of reference to the wiretaps and the conversations that were recorded surreptitiously on Dr. King, and the recordings in the White House and the Oval Office. Of course, with interviews of people that interacted with these main characters during those very, very turbulent years in American history. But sometimes I felt as if I was watching one of the best West Wing episodes as I was reading At Canaan's Edge. It was engrossing, and I was completely transported to those years. Lots of conflict. He not only talks about President Johnson and all the myriad accomplishments during that presidency. There was Medicare, and there was increased funding for the schools, as well as integration and the Voting Rights Act, as well as the Civil Rights Act. It was, I admired so much the people, the sharecroppers, the poor people in the South who were so courageous, who sacrificed so much, including their lives, to try to vote. And how that effort to just try to vote was such a scandal to the establishment, to a very entrenched establishment throughout the United States. Because when Dr. King against the better judgment of a lot of his supporters and colleagues in the civil rights movement, when some decided to start working in the North, right, in the northern cities, you could see the reaction. I remember the reaction of certain neighborhoods in Chicago very well. As a matter of fact, that's one of the places where Dr. King received a brick to the head. I remember that clearly. But this was also a very good book to recall other things that happened during those years. For example, the FBI intrigue surrounding not only Dr. King, trying to counter his reputation. As a matter of fact, Taylor Branch does not skirt the fact that Dr. King had what I hear people are calling polyamorous situations, and he doesn't skirt that at all. But neither does he skirt the fact, avoid the fact that Hoover, Edgar J. Hoover, and his cronies had an entirely different government, had an entirely, it was like a government in and of itself. And the ways that he manipulated powerful people in the government, threatening them with wiretaps and the secrets that he had accumulated over the years, over the decades that he had wielded power in the FBI. That was another eye-opening and scary part of the reading of the 3 books, actually, not just at Canaan's Edge. I took my time making this video because I thought it was very important, especially in book 3. I had tried to do it in the first 2 books, but I definitely did it in book 3, and that is to say their names. And in that page, I wrote down the martyrs, people who were killed by the KKK, by fanatics who did not want to see black people registering to vote. And I'm not going to read all their names. I'll probably scroll them later on in the video. But just in 1965 alone, in 1965, there were 16 people who were killed. And then there were those in 1963, of which there were 7. And then there was Medgar Evers also. So, yeah. The fact that we have people who are still trying to make voting so difficult, and the fact that there were people willing to die to be able to register to vote, that to me was mind-boggling. Mind-boggling to me, especially given the fact that you can vote and have a popular vote in the United States and still have the Electoral College steal your elections. If not the Electoral College, then the Supreme Court. So, yeah. Hi, people, back. Sorry about that. Had to take a call, very important call, and the sun went down, so this will be really quick. I just wanted to get the last few thoughts about my reading of Taylor Branch's wonderful prize-winning series, trilogy, on America during the King years. One of the most salient topics that is talked about in this series is the Vietnam War. And as I read, I was reminded of the fact that the Vietnam War was something that touched Puerto Rican lives very, very much. Our young men were subject to the draft during those years, and many came back with what is now known as PTSD. I think that's the name of it. So much so that those veterans became part of our culture. Not only part of our culture, but those vets became part of our comedy sketches. And I'm going to include, especially for those Spanish-speaking people that have been subscribing, hello new subscribers, for those who remember Raul Carbonell and his Herminio, who were Vietnam veterans. Jose Miguel Agrelot had many skits on Korean and World War II veterans. El Soldadito Manteca. There's Juan Manuel Lebrón, and many of these sketches are still available on YouTube. Then I also wanted to mention that I really enjoyed, for the most part, the writing style in that Taylor Branch employed in the trilogy. But towards the end, I sort of noticed that there were glitches. It's like when you rub your hand over a nice, soft velvet, and there's a snag as you pass your hand over it. That happened many times during this, especially this last reading of At Canaan's Edge. I don't know what happened there, but there were certain sentence structures that really jarred my understanding of what was happening. It would cause me to, I don't understand. I just wanted to bring it up just in case. Lots of tension, lots of suspense. Many times it read like a novel. Yeah. And I could not end this without again thanking especially the ladies who are in charge of Topple for the opportunity to read the first two parts of the trilogy, and then to the hosts of the Marching Mammoths, Jason and Alex and Lukas, for the opportunity to read this last part of the trilogy. I could not help but feel saddened by the fact that during those final days of my reading At Canaan's Edge, there were 3 black churches burned in Louisiana, and then the Highlander Center, to which Dr. King had gone and visited. The administration building there was burned on March 29th of this year. So there's still a lot of work to do, people, but I never lose hope, because there are still people who, like Dr. King, are marching on. So I'm really happy to have read this book, and I recommend it to anybody who wants to read an engrossing history of America during the civil rights years. Adiós, mi gente, cuídense mucho.